Reea. I'm an intuitive life and relationship coach and a therapist, and I work exclusively with women. And today I want to talk about pathological giving. So I remember there was a book that came out in the 80s, and it was called something like Women Who Love Too Much. I was going through trauma at the time in a relationship, and someone directed me to that book. I read it, even though I hated the title, and I did identify with some of the stuff that was written in there, but really, honestly, it kind of pissed me off. Then there was the whole codependent no more stuff. So for a long time, I looked into the fact that, hey, maybe I was codependent. And I read all the literature, and I went and had therapy and counseling and coaching. And maybe I was a little bit codependent when I was younger, before I did the work on myself and worked through my shit. But I certainly don't identify with being codependent anymore. And I guess I didn't identify with being codependent at the time that I entered my last relationship with a narcissist. So there's many different words that we use to describe this whole thing about, the kind of woman or person, male or female, who gets involved with a narcissist. And in some literature, you'll see them described as codependent. In other literature, you'll see them described as empaths, and there are other words that are used out there in therapy land. I identify with being an empath, but I don't identify with being codependent, and maybe you don't either. So what I want to talk to you about today is this whole notion of pathological giving. Whether you're codependent or an empath, you're probably pathologically giving too much. And why do women do that? Well, I believe there's a couple of really good reasons. One is that we're socialized into doing that. I don't know about you, but I was given the very strong belief as a child that as a woman, it was my job to look after everybody else. And certainly my mother did all of the housework, cleaning, child rearing, gardening, sewing, knitting, cooking. And my father, my dear father, who was a very hard worker and always brought home the bacon, and he mowed the lawn and did all the boy stuff. But the rest of the time, yeah, he was pretty much asleep on the couch. So that was certainly, and that's not unusual. I mean, leave me a comment if that was you, but that was pretty much most of the family lives that we got brought up with, right? You may have had something out of the ordinary, and congratulations if you did. But I think that's pretty much the general theme. And, if we look at the research, it says today that women are still doing much more of the second shift, shall we call it. After they've worked a part-time or a full-time job, they're still doing most of the work around the home. And shout out there to all of you amazing males who are the opposite of that, who have stepped up and are taking your fair share of doing the household chores and looking after your children. You're heroes to me. I think you're amazing. But I see very few of you out there. I think you're a minority. Maybe I'm wrong. So pathological giving is also a biological imperative in women, from the perspective that when women complete personality tests, they always score much higher on the domain of agreeability than males. What does being agreeable mean? It means that we're more likely to put somebody else's needs first. We're more likely to give in to a little bit of pressure. We probably have a higher desire to be liked. We think that in order to be liked, we've got to be a specific way. We've got to be giving and loving and nurturing, and that's been programmed into us. So I think it's a bit of a biological thing, and I think it's a socialized thing. the reason why women often feel that they give too much. And let's face it, we live in a society where everything is the mother's fault, right? I mean, the mother always cops it in the neck. So I don't know. I've got 3 children and 4 grandchildren. You can never do a proper job of it. I mean, it's the hardest job you will ever have in your entire life. It's certainly the hardest job I ever had in my life, and it hasn't finished yet. I'm in my 60s. It's still going, and my kids are all grown up, but I'm still you're still mothering. You still keep doing it. Also has its great rewards, by the way, but yeah, it's a hard job. And of course, we know that you can overparent, so that there's no such thing as a perfect mother. That's a complete myth. And we know what's best for children is good enough parenting. Okay, so if you're too good a parent and doing too much for your children, that's not healthy for them either. But let's get back to the pathological giving thing. So I posted this thing on my Facebook page the other day, and I said, do you identify with being pathological givers? And a lot of women said, yeah, I totally do. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that today and what you might do to actually turn that around for yourself. I guess the problem with being a pathological giver is feeling that you have to give and you can't say no. So women are often, a lot of women are not good at saying no. And they also give way to emotional pressure. So, if your partner's in a lot of emotional pain and suffering, or your children are showing you emotional pain and suffering, or they're crying, or they're whatever, we're much more likely to give in to them because women have big hearts, right? We are tuned into the feelings of our families. Well, if we're a good mother, we're tuned into the feelings of our families. There are plenty of narcissistic mothers out there who aren't tuned into the feelings of their families, but I think this is something that we aspire to. Being emotionally responsive is something that we know is good for children, and so we try and do that. But, you can't stop your children from feeling pain. And sometimes we want to give in to them to stop them from feeling pain because it's making us hurt. That would be the empath thing, right? We feel their pain and we don't want to feel their pain, so we give in to them so they're not in pain, and that leaves us in pain. So what's the problem with pathological giving? Well, the problem is that we end up getting resentful because we give and give and give and give from the belief that if we just love everybody and if we just send love out into the world, we'll attract that which we give and we will receive all the love that we need back. And for a long time, coming from a spiritual perspective, I believed the same thing. The problem is that I learnt that wasn't true. Yeah, that was a big shock to the system, let me tell you. I had to discard that belief. I certainly believe in sending love out to the universe and being as loving as I can, but what I learnt was that my number one job was to love myself first. Now, a lot of women are going to find that very hard to hear. We don't want to love ourselves first. We want someone else to love us. Oh, that's so much easier. And, like I said, if we've been socialized into caring for everybody else and putting ourselves last, then that program is in there and we're operating out of that program and those beliefs, so it's not easy to hear this. I can remember years ago when I was pondering whether I was codependent and reading that book, Codependent No More. There was it was Mother's Day, and there was an award being given by Dr. Bernardo's Homes to the best mother in the whole world. I'm listening to this on the radio or something. And they said they chose this particular woman because she was completely selfless. She just gave and gave and gave and gave to all of the children in her care without any need of reward. And when I heard that, it made me really, really angry. I thought to myself, well, the odds are stacked against us. Is that what a good mother is? Somebody who gives and gives and gives and never, ever receives anything back. So if you're that sort of mother, what are you actually teaching your children? You're teaching your children to take without gratitude, without really any personal insight in understanding what's going on here. And so what are they going to do? Grow up and be little narcissists? So yeah, that sounds to me like a recipe for a whole generation of narcissistic adults. Because we know children are narcissists, right? They're supposed to be. They feel like they're the center of the universe. And, hopefully as they grow up, we socialize them out of that and they realize they are not the center of the universe, that other people have needs too, and that, it's a balancing act. So, pathological giving. There's nothing wrong with giving, but you have to make sure that you are being taken care of, that you are loving yourself, and that you are keeping some sort of internal insight. I was going to say scorecard, but that's the wrong thing to say. You're keeping an internal record, right, of how much you are giving. Now, I'll tell you when to know that you've given too much. When you start to feel resentment, right? Your emotions are your emotional guidance system. This is your inner being, your higher self, your soul talking to you. And when you get that feeling of resentment, you know that you have allowed other people to step over your boundaries and you have given too much. So the minute you feel resentment, it's time to give yourself a smack and step back and go, okay, it's not that I need to tell the other person to change their behavior. It's not that I need to say anything to the other person. That might be step 2. But step 1 is for you to step back and go, okay, I'm feeling resentment. That means I'm giving too much. I need to take care of myself. I need to do something for myself here. I need to put down a boundary. Now, some people find it really hard to say no. I used to be one of those, but I practiced and I got better at it. So let me tell you how I did it. I just started saying no. So remember, when you're saying no, particularly if you're first starting, you don't have to justify your no. You don't have to defend your no. You don't have to give an excuse. You just look at the other person, you smile, and you go, no, that doesn't work for me right now. Now, if that's something that you find hard to do, you can use this strategy, and that is, when someone asks you to do something, automatically practice saying, I'll have to get back to you on that. So don't give a yes, no in the moment that you're asked. Give yourself time and space to consider it, to check in with yourself and see whether you feel resentful if you're going to do it, right? Give yourself a little bit of breathing space, and then you can go back to the person. Now, if you're at work and you have trouble saying no at work, you can always send them an email and say no. I guess in our personal life, if you have trouble saying no face-to-face, you can always do it on text message or something like that. But it literally is something that you've got to practice saying no. And then the other thing to remember is that a lot of people don't have boundaries. They don't know how to put boundaries down, and they may have had their boundaries invaded by a parent who didn't know how to respect other people's boundaries, or in fact have any boundaries themselves maybe. So boundaries are really, really important in a healthy relationship. And the number one rule of putting down a boundary is that it's none of your business how the other person reacts to your boundary. If you've thought carefully about the boundary, you've got to make sure that you actually say it in the right way. So there's a way of saying, speaking the boundary if you're going to do that. So it's none of your business how the other person reacts, and they will react negatively, because if somebody wants something off you and they're used to you saying yes, 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 yes all the time, they're going to get a rude awakening when you say no. They're going to feel shocked. They're going to try and pressure you, and they might even get pissed off with you. So it's none of your business how the other person behaves when you say no. That is their stuff for them to take care of. They have to take responsibility for their own feelings. And the number 2 rule about putting down a boundary is that you have to be like a broken record sometimes. So sometimes you just have to keep stating the boundary. Remember, not defending yourself and not justifying, because defense and justification are the energy of conflict. The minute you do that, you are starting a fight with someone. That's what you're doing. So just say no, that doesn't work for me, or however you want to phrase this. And then when you're putting down the boundary, you keep just restating the boundary. No, here is the boundary. This is the boundary. This is the boundary. This is the boundary. This is the boundary. So you've got no one to blame for being a pathological giver but yourself. That sounds harsh, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, your number one job is to take care of yourself. Mothers, if you don't take care of yourself, you have no energy to take care of your children. If you were in an aeroplane, they always say, put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child, because if you're dead, you can't help them. And I believe that the path to enlightenment on our planet right now is us truly learning to love ourselves and everything that that means. So one of the big aspects of loving yourself is having firm boundaries, being able to say no, and taking responsibility for that feeling of resentment that you feel when you've said yes too many times and you feel like you've been taken advantage of and you're not taking care of yourself. You can't make someone else take care of you, but you can take care of yourself. So I would love to hear what you think about all that. Please leave me a comment below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more.